Hi guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Lion and the Liverbird podcast. But I think it's more about the Lion than the Liverbird this time because of Chelsea's win over. As I said, it would be a drunk Liverpool side, and that's exactly what happened at Stamford Bridge. 3-1 to Chelsea, deserving winners. Obviously, the Liverpool team was a little different to what has been playing, but pressure's off. We won the Premier League title. The pressure was on Chelsea actually to get a good result to keep their top four, top five Champions League hopes alive. And lo and behold, they did really well. So we wanted to do something a little different to what we normally do and discuss and dissect the game. We actually wanted to talk about the player ratings from this game. So I want to start off first with the Liverpool player ratings, and I'm not going to give any ratings because we were absolutely diabolical. Uh, Mohamed Salah doesn't drink alcohol. I know because of his religion, but he seemed completely out of sorts. I think he was up against Cucurella, right? It was
Yeah.
Cucurella. So Cucurella was doing a really good job. I know he's a good player, but whatever. So I think the only two players that came out with any sort of a decent rating, I'd give them sevens, is Wataru Endo and Virgil van Dijk. I think he seemed to be like the person who was really upset as to what's happening. The others just were just so you understand why this happened, right? Like you won the title, there's nothing else to play for, so they're just chilling around. Uh, Allison had one of those crazy moments where he, I think, took down Nicholas Jackson way outside the box, where he was saved by the offside flag. So a really disjointed performance, nothing really to talk about. The only other positive that I can talk about from this game is Federico Chiesa getting his fifth Premier League game. So he's got to win the
So
medal.
he'll get a medal
He'll get a
now.
medal. He'll get a medal.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've
Woo!
seen this or not on social media. We got a chant for him.
He
Uh,
is a high represent.
yeah. So we've got a really, really, really fun chant for Chiesa. He's done barely anything at Liverpool, but we love him. So it's good he gets to this thing. Harvey Elliott also got a run out, but it wasn't that great. But I'll leave this segment to Rohit because it's all about the Chelsea team and how they did and how maybe this can guarantee a top four position for them.
Well, I mean, it's come down to the fact that, Chelsea can only beat Liverpool if Liverpool have partied hard the night before or something like that. But we'll take it for now, right? We are pretty desperate to, get into the top five and get into the Champions League. One thing I wanted to talk about, Adim, is you guys still dominated possession. You had 65% possession. Chelsea, under Maresca always likes to retain possession and play, boring possession ball, but this was kind of interesting. We conceded possession, you guys dominated possession 65%, but we ended up winning, right? So in terms of the player ratings, right, I specifically wanted to concentrate on a few players, because the narratives and the discussion can be interesting, right? The first player I want to talk about is Romeo Lavia, right? I've cried a lot about his injury woes and, the fact that he's not completed a 90-minute in 2 seasons. He still hasn't, right? But he's a critical player for Maresca. And basically because, he's really good in that first phase of build-up. Chelsea want to play out from the back and they want somebody who's comfortable under pressure when the opposition is pressing, and Lavia is that guy. Not only is he comfortable under pressure, but he also has a really good line breaking pass in him, right? And we saw that for the first goal. I don't know if you noticed that Lavia retained the ball and didn't play the safe easy pass, but he waited for Cole Palmer to make an interesting run and lose his marker. I think Curtis Jones was marking Palmer, and
Another
the
cow
moment, yeah,
Scouser slipped against Chelsea, but it didn't cost us the
yeah.
title this time.
That's a good one. Yeah, because I heard the Liverpool fans, the Chelsea fans chanting the Gerrard slip song as well. But yeah, so essentially, he waited for Palmer to make this reverse kind of run and lose his marker, and then he released Palmer. Palmer subsequently passed it to Neto, who kind of drove into the box and played it kind of into the edge of the area. And Enzo Fernandez, who we're going to talk about in a minute, had a very smart first touch and finish, right? So that goal epitomized the importance of Lavia because we've had the hardest time playing these line breaking passes that moves the game along, right? Our central midfield options have been Caicedo and Enzo. Both of them are really good, but neither of them excel in this, right? Keeping hold of the ball under pressure, finding that line breaking pass. And for Maresca's system, Lavia becomes a crucial player, right? So, going into the last three games, I don't know whether he's still going to be fit. Hopefully, if he is, it's going to make a big difference whether we can qualify for the Champions League or not. And something needs to be done for next season, right? because I would err on the side of caution and I would say, okay, Lavia next season again will have his injury worries because he's still young, right? He's clearly battling some pretty major injury issues. So how are we going to ensure, under Maresca that we have somebody who does his job? We have a couple of young players already signed, as central midfielders. We obviously have Andre Santos, who's doing really well for Strasbourg in France. They're very close to qualifying for the Champions League. Strasbourg, who's our sister team. That's going to be interesting if that happens, and if Chelsea fails to qualify. So maybe he can do part of it, but Romeo Lavia is a critical player. And I know there was a bit of a banter between Romeo Lavia and the Liverpool fans when he was substituted, because I think you guys were trying to sign him and Chelsea ended up getting him. So that's always nice to see a young man who's had his injury worries, put on a good performance and, at the end of the day, have a little bit of fun as well. I don't know. What do you think about Lavia? Do you think, if he had been fit, he could have made Liverpool even better if you guys had gotten him?
In hindsight, I don't know how much more better we could have been, because obviously that would have meant that Gravenberch would not be
Mm-hmm.
playing in the position that he's playing. But there obviously is a reason why we wanted to sign him. For whatever reason, he chose you over us, be it wages, be it playing time, whatever it was. But Lavia is an interesting player, and there was a lot of interest in him. It fell through for whatever reason. And I think, working under people like Maresca, under Slot, at least I could say from the Slot perspective, he improves players and he fits them into the team really well. Nobody expected Gravenberch to do what he did this season. Nobody expected Dominic Szoboszlai to do what he did this season, and obviously Mohamed Salah. So it's interesting what could have been for Lavia. And well, talking from a perspective of watching the game and enjoying the game, I hope he stays injury free, because we've seen a lot of really good talents suffer these injuries and really not even hit their mark. So Jack Wilshere obviously did hit his mark, but he couldn't obviously sustain himself. There was obviously Abu Dhabi of Arsenal that we all remember. So hopefully this is a good, like, this is just the start of the good things for Lavia at Chelsea.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I think fingers crossed. Hopefully, he can stay fit and we can have a good time. The second person who I'd like to talk about is Enzo, like midfield partner for Lavia. He of course scored the first goal that we were alluding to. A very smart finish, right? A really good late run into the box. People were calling it Lampard-esque, right? That's obviously hyperbole, but still, he controlled the ball very well and slotted it into the corner, right, away from Alisson. So that was a really quick start, a good goal to begin with, and then he was pretty, good throughout the game, right? Now, why I want to talk about Enzo is his productivity has gone up substantially this season, right? He is at 20 goals plus assists total. I think 11 assists and 9 goals across all the entire season, which is by far his best season in his professional career, right? So he is one of the players that Enzo Maresca has improved, right? We were just talking about the fact that a lot of people's forms have dipped, like Cole Palmer and such, but Enzo Fernandez has really improved under Enzo Maresca. Uh, so the other interesting thing is the fact that Lavia was on the pitch and Caicedo, who's normally playing as a defensive midfielder, he was playing as a right back, inverting into midfield. That gave Enzo Fernandez additional freedom to bomb ahead, right? Because he didn't have to worry about the defensive aspect that he normally does, right? So having Lavia there and Caicedo kind of inverting also unlocks Enzo Fernandez to an extent. And I think Enzo obviously is a very critical player because goals and assists are obviously important, and he's delivering that. But he's also a critical cog in our wheel. He can find the long pass, he can find the through pass, and be effective in the final third. Right. So Enzo Fernandez is the second player that had a good game. And of course, the price tag hasn't always helped Enzo over the last couple of years, right? 100 and X million pounds, right? But he is generally a good player, right? And hopefully our midfield starts gelling. And I remember the first time Enzo played Liverpool was also one of his best games. So I think something in Liverpool brings out the best in him. Yeah, I know he obviously has a mate across the field and Mac Allister, right? They're pretty close. So who do you think is better between the two, Enzo or Mac Allister? Obviously, you're going to say Mac Allister,
I'm
but
gonna say
what are your
McAllister.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, no. There's no competition. It's Mac Allister, and this is not with tinted glasses. Although I am wearing glasses, it's just I've seen more of Mac Allister. I see, the thing is, it always plays out with which team you're starting for and how that team is doing. Cole Palmer last season was flying, and everybody was saying he's the best player in the Premier League, whereas this season it's not been the same. So you could say something similar for Enzo Fernandez, right? I mean, he's a quality player. He's an Argentina international. He's a World Cup winner. But things haven't clicked for him at Chelsea, maybe under Maresca, maybe under Pochettino, whatever it is. So, and I think the other thing is Mac Allister is a little more versatile. So he can play as the number 10, he can play a little deeper, and he's shown that for Liverpool. So for me, Mac Allister does get the nod. But obviously they're two different players, so you can't always just,
Yeah.
one is better than the other.
Agreed. I think, yeah, Mac Allister definitely is more well-rounded, in that sense. But Enzo probably has certain peaks that are better than Mac Allister. But anyways, time will tell. We'll see what happens with that rivalry. It's a nice rivalry that will obviously play out for the next many years to come. So moving on, right? I wanted to really touch upon this particular player, right? And that is Trevoh Chalobah. With Wesley Fofana out, Trevoh Chalobah has become our first choice right centre back, right? Which is such a huge turnaround from what was happening with him at the beginning of the season, right? Trevoh Chalobah, Cobham boy, Chelsea through and through, Chelsea youth product, a really solid defender who's also versatile, who can play in midfield, who can play in right back. He was basically transfer listed just for balancing the books and financial fair play. And not only was he transfer listed for a certain period of time, I think he was not even allowed to practice with the first team at the beginning of the season, right? Which is a really unforgivable, if you ask me, right? Somebody who's a youth product, somebody who's served us so well, and he really played well last season as well, and he was crucial in the last run up, the last couple of games that we won with Pochettino, and that's how you reward him. That's how you treat him. And of course, they shipped him out to Crystal Palace, and he did really well in Crystal Palace on a loan, right? And then they had to call him back because, of course, Wes Fofana has always been injured. He's out for the season. Tosin wasn't performing well, and we had a major gap in our defense. And so, they had to take a U-turn and call Chalobah back. Kudos to Chalobah, right? If I was in his place or anybody else was in his place, they would have been so mad and angry, right? Like being kind of thrown around like a rag, piece of rag, right? Especially after what he's contributed. But that's not Chalobah. He's a much better person than I could ever be, and a lot of people I know. He's put in an amazing performance, and he's our first choice right center back with Colwell now, and he was also really good in this game, right? Made many crucial tackles, right? But the point I want to make here is this, right, Adim? I know how our technical directors and owners operate. The owners obviously are American and they have that American mindset. And Adim, in American sports, especially in NBA, you could get traded to another team and have no say in it, right? We've seen that with Luka Doncic, right? Right now, with what happened in this last month with him moving to the Lakers. He kind of didn't know, it was out of the blue. That's not how football works, right? Football has, loyalty as a central kind of crux of the sport, right? The fact that you treat your own players, the people who have served you well with respect, especially your academy products, is such a central part of any team, right? I don't think these guys understand that. They look at players like commodities to be traded to balance books, and that does not bode well, right? I really think that we've already lost a lot of promising youngsters from our academy. I think Rio and Guma is one player
Yeah.
who's come to your team, for example, right?
He's
I
already
think he's going
played
to
for
tear it
us.
up. Yep,
He
yep,
already
he's
played with
going
the
to tear
first
it up pretty soon because he's super talented, right? And a lot of young players are also going to look at this and they're going to be like, okay, Chelsea doesn't seem to have any loyalty towards their own players, right? Why will I sign for them, right? So I think that's my takeaway from there. But kudos to Chalobah for kind of standing up and really proving his worth again and again. And to be honest with you, I see this playing out the same way, Adim, in the summer. They'll again transfer list him because they need the pure profit, right? It'll be a really shameful day when that happens, but I really don't see, how these owners and technical directors and sporting directors are going to do anything differently. Yeah, what do you have to say about that? Do you think, the way forward in football is just emulating what happens in the US, or football needs to keep its heart, it needs to keep its core?
It's difficult to pinpoint that because we are seeing certain things that are Americanized or they're Americanizing football. The contracts that you guys put out, right? I mean, the 7-year, 8-year deals, that's basically a little American. And then there's also been talks about playing games away from the country. Like I think the Super Coppa Italia or the Coppa Italia finals, the semi-finals are played in Saudi Arabia. And there was this talk of a 39th Premier League game being played in the US. So I do think football will change. But in terms of transfers, I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference. I think it will stay the same because we will be talking about one such transfer a little later in the next bit, but I really don't think the transfer bit will change. Now, see, the other aspect is that the Chelsea owners don't understand football. I don't know what is in their heads. This is something that we've spoken about almost in every other episode. They think that this is an NFL team or an NBA team or something like that, and they're stockpiling talent, and then somehow they'll get trades and they'll get a first round pick or something. It's not gonna happen. They need to understand this is not going to happen, whatever they do. And something or another always happens to you guys in the sense that, you're falling foul of this thing, financial fair play rules or something or another. So I don't know when this will go into the heads. I don't know what's going to happen, but they need a proper dressing down to understand that football is not the same as American sport.
Yeah, hopefully, but my I don't have my hopes up, to be honest with you. Okay, a couple of quick honorable mentions before we talk at length about one of the last players. Caicedo obviously had a great match, right? He played well. He started at right back and he kept inverting, and obviously he was winning duels, winning tackles, doing what he does best. He also won the penalty, the third goal that we scored because of a penalty that he won. Neto had a decent game. He set up the first goal. Noni Madueke, interestingly, started on the left wing, right? He's a left-footed winger who normally starts in the right wing, but on the left wing, Mudryk is out because of doping, and Sancho has been, very lukewarm this season. So Noni Madueke actually played really well. I don't know what you thought of him, but he took on, the defensive line of Liverpool again and again, and he went into the penalty box, I think the highest number of time or something. So he was really good. He was also instrumental in the second goal, right? Endo had a brilliant tackle that blocked Madueke, and then subsequently Kwamsa scored with his crotch after Van Dijk shot it towards him. But Madueke has been a revelation on the left-hand side, and I think that's good, right? He's raising the bar. He's a good young player. And of course, the final person is Kukurea because he had a great game against Mo Salah, right? Obviously, the player of the season this season. Being able to kind of nullify him was great. But the player that I wanted to talk a little at length is, I think, Cole Palmer, right? He had a really great game, right? For the second goal, he did most of the work, right? He went past, I think, Tsimikas and put in a wonderful ball in, which created a lot of confusion. He was also instrumental in the first goal, right? He just made that run we talked about, and Lavia found him, and then his pass to Neto basically was crucial in that goal. But most importantly, he converted his penalty, right? Caicedo won that penalty right at the end. He stepped up, and a pretty good penalty right in the bottom corner, although Alisson dove in the right direction, right? This was important, and this was much more important than what at least I thought it was for Cole Palmer, right? Because Cole Palmer has been prolific since he joined Chelsea, but not so much in the last 2 or 3 months, right? He's only had a couple of assists, and the last time he scored was in February or January or something. He hasn't scored that much. And you could see that in his game. You could see that he was hurrying shots, he was taking the wrong decision. He also missed a penalty for the first time a couple of months ago, right? So we were all happy for him. But in the post-match conference is when, his emotions came out, right? I think the interviewer asked him about how he was coping with his, downturn in form, and whether this particular goal actually gave him a boost and such. And he really came out and said, that how much all of the online trolling was affecting him. So because he wasn't performing at his usual high levels, obviously people were trolling him, online. And these are young kids, remember, right? They're early 20s, right? And obviously they're always online and they're reading comments. We, at least from our perspective, I didn't think that maybe it doesn't affect them, but it clearly does, right? He had a pretty stellar interview, and he basically let his heart out and talked about how all of this has been affecting him, but also the fact that he's trying to get over it and not pay too much attention to it. So This confidence thing, I think we talked about it a little bit, is obviously important, right, for players, but especially in this modern day where, feedback from like a whole horde of rabid fans is so easily kind of, transmitted to the player. It becomes even more important for these guys to be resilient and to have the right support, right? What do you think about that? Like the, modern young player in a world of social media and trolling and vitriol and things like that.
So I think it's very difficult for a player nowadays to not have a social media account and not, see what's going on. So the problem with the internet is obviously trolls have a voice. They hide behind a picture. You don't know who's behind that, and they just say what they want to say. And unfortunately, almost every player does need a social media or two, three social media accounts because that makes them more marketable. You want 3 million, 4 million people to see your tweet or read your caption on Instagram or whatever it is. But I do think that teams should, or I think they do have psychologists. I'm sure every team has a psychologist to help out the players because the stuff that you see online is terrible. I mean, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, some of the things that you read over there, you don't want to read. And it really does affect us. It affects you and me. I mean, forget about the players. We read, I mean, it's not even directed at us and we feel like, oh my God, what's going on? So you're right. It's a 22, 23-year-old kid. I mean, when we were 22 or 23, if somebody was writing so much nonsense about us, I don't know how we would take it. So this is the problem. The FA keeps saying that they'll deal with this, they'll deal with this. They never deal with it. I mean, I think only two or three people have ever been caught in the case, and it's been like it's escalated. Like they've said something really, really, really terrible. Like the worst part of racism or something comes out, and that's when they wake up and they say, "Oh, we'll deal with it." But otherwise, they really don't care about anything. They're just allowing it to go on. So, fault lies with the FA and the authorities. They can take a harsh step. So they are basically arresting people for. I'm sure you would have heard of this. They're arresting people for all those fake for those websites that stream matches illegally, right? Like they're shutting down websites and all that. But then people who do grisly stuff in the UK, they get lenient sentences. So I think somebody's been sentenced to 8 years in jail for running one of these streaming sites. So you can just see how important, I mean, where the
The
priorities
bottom line
go.
and money, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it's all
priority is
money.
with money.
Yeah. So that's
Well, yeah,
what it is.
yeah. You made some very interesting points, and unfortunately, that money is kind of the underlying factor in multiple things, right? Including the way Chelsea is being run right now. It is slightly sad, but you can only hope for the best. So I think with that, that was basically the players' ratings. A couple of our players didn't have great games, namely Nicholas Jackson. He kept slipping and falling over, but that's okay. He's just back from injury.